Appreciate you being here today. My name is Al Larson with the Department of Public Safety. This afternoon, we are going to walk you through an expansion of the city's holistic approach to crime reduction and quality of life improvement in the city. We have a lot of material to get through in a short period of time today, so without further delay, I would like to introduce the Mayor of Indianapolis, Greg Ballard.
Well, good afternoon. And there's a lot of people to thank for us getting to this point today, but Director Riggs and his team have been terrific on this, and I think you'll see that today. So I want to thank them for their commitment to our city and building an even better and more efficient police department and the team that surrounds all that. But bringing these data points together helps us understand the underlying causes of crime, and it will allow IMPD to give a better and more well-rounded approach. And there are many contributing factors to criminal activity, I think, as most of you know. But now IMPD and the Public Safety Department have hard data that can really dig into those issues and identify the best ways to address those problems. You've heard me say many times before that we have to change the mix of what we're doing. We're doing a lot of right things, but we have to change that up a little bit and do a little bit more of this, maybe a little bit less of this, and maybe some new things also. We have to change that mix. And a select few neighborhoods in the city have been mired with similar problems for a long time here in Indianapolis. And if we can identify those points where all these problems intersect, we can be much more intentional in our response. IMPD can look at the various incidents and they look at the contributing factors in those areas and how to put that together. And some of what you see today will surprise you. And as a community, we should make sure that we just don't treat the end result, which is what we generally try to do, just treat the end result. We want to change that. And we should identify and treat the many contributing factors along the way. And this new information will help us do that by bringing in others who know how to treat those problems that lead to that bad end result. And this new data will be studied in every way possible to make a difference. This is meant to reduce crime, but it is also meant to improve the quality of life in these neighborhoods at the same time. So I want to thank everybody for the great work getting done. It took a long time to get here. This is not a 3 or 4 week exercise. This is well over a year. And IMPD and others have been putting this together so we can look at this differently. So I'm really happy about this leap forward and how we're thinking about this, the more holistic approach, looking at underlying factors and what we can do about it. Again, I think you'll be surprised at some of the things you're going to see, but it's time we look at it differently. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Public Safety Director, Troy Riggs.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. We'll see if this works out. There we go. Thank you. First of all, let me just say, I can't tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work of the 3,200 men and women of the Department of Public Safety to get to this point today. 2 years of very difficult work, hard work, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. Also want to thank our community partners that are here. This is unique to Indianapolis to have so many community partners that are willing to get together, faith-based, nonprofits, all coming together because we care about our city. This city has a rich history of dealing with issues and overcoming issues, and I am confident that with its history and with the work that's being done by the city under the mayor's leadership, we will be successful. So a couple of things just to kind of reset. 2 years ago, my 2-year anniversary is coming up at the end of this month. And the mayor, when we first sat down, really talked about a lot of issues and things he wanted me to tackle, but 2 were very prevalent. Number 1, to build upon the business principles that he had brought to the city, and we continue to do that today. One of the things we have worked very hard on, and that's with my Deputy Director, Valerie Washington, who deserves a great deal of credit in this area, is we ensured that we had goals and objectives. We ensured that we were having administrative reviews, that what we said we were going to do, we were accomplishing. We put together efficiency teams to deal with a myriad of issues that you, the community, that our workforce told us we needed to deal with, and we have had about 30 of those already. We have 30 others either ongoing or planned for 2015, and we have made huge differences. And as a result of those teams that make us efficient and effective, our departments are running in the black, our budgets are sound, And as a result, we are finding savings in one case to put 50 officers on the street each and every year. Enough money to find sustainable funding for 50 officers. Chief Height and his team deserve a great deal of credit. And when you think of that, that's $125,000 per officers. And that was done with community support, FOP support, Department of Public Safety, and certainly the mayor's office. The second thing that the mayor talked about was bringing data to the forefront in what we do in the city of Indianapolis. Data has changed the way we do sports, it's changed the way we have purchased products online, but it has yet to change the way we do government. It will, and we'd like to think in the United States it will begin here today in the great city of Indianapolis. So with that said, I want to introduce to you a couple of 6 of the areas that we see that we think that we can do a better job as a Department of Public Safety, and where our citizens that live in these areas, we believe that they deserve better. And we want to work together not only as a Department of Public Safety, but as a community. We looked at data back from 2012 to current and came up with these 6 areas. That data was put together by the police department looking at crime data. Just looking at crime data, violent crime, property crime throughout our community. Then Chief Height sat down with his staff and said, we need to move these a little bit because of trending. And we talked to people who have been involved in public safety for 10, 20 years in the city of Indianapolis and said a lot of the issues we're seeing are systemic issues in these areas, and they agreed. So we decided if we're going to get started dealing with some of the issues in our community, we're still going to make runs, we're going to be focused on the city in general, but we need to begin in 6 areas where our citizens and our neighbors and friends live that are dealing with most of the issues. I want to walk you through a couple or one of these areas and show you how we're breaking these down. This is 16th and Tibbs, and there'll be some associated slides. This is only the beginning. We're going to dig down deep for data in each one of these. What you're seeing in this area is that 16th and Tibbs, the area that we've denoted with data, is 1.5 square miles. That's 0.4% of the landmass of Indianapolis. Population of 8,500 people, 0.9% of the population that we serve as a Department of Public Safety. Each one of the slides that you'll see, and when you'll see this online or get a copy of, will be laid out in this same format. This data is from 2013, January of 2013 to August the 15th of 2014. So we're combining and looking at all these apples to apples, so to speak. In this area, 8,000 of our residents live in an area that accounts for over 11,000 police runs. 11,505 to be exact. Over 2,000 EMS runs, a total of 14,000 calls for service in this area. Remember, this area accounts for 0.9% of the population, but 1.7% of all calls for service in the Department of Public Safety. The other thing we know and will become very apparent is that most of these calls are emergency type calls. These are not quality of life calls. We'll start digging that data a little bit more, but we've got to be serious and look at it this way. You'll see the emergency runs in a moment. At the bottom, we draw a comparison between all of Indianapolis, including these 6 areas, what the average is in Indianapolis compared to this area. And what we found out that if you live in this area, you live in an area that has a 152% greater chance that a homicide is going to occur here in the 16th and Tibbs area than anywhere else in the city of Indianapolis. You will also notice that the percentage of a non-fatal shooting in this area is 454% greater than any area in the city of Indianapolis. I go back to the original statement. We, as a Department of Public Safety, need to do a better job for the citizens in this area. Now, we know those first 2 numbers are very correct because we pretty much know when someone is killed in our city and when someone is shot. The next 2 numbers are calls for service, so we know they're underreported by nature. Chief Miramati and his group has really done a good job breaking it down. The difference between the rest of the city of Indianapolis and this area is 173% for overdoses. And now we have to have a very clear conversation in our city about mental illness, something the mayor has talked about time and time again, that mental illness in this area, or emotional runs, are 100% greater than anywhere else in the city of Indianapolis. This is about improving the quality of life of residents in our great city. If you live in this area, do you really think that you would get up every morning, go home every night, and feel safe? We have to do better. And I want to make this point, I want to make it very clear. This is the safest, by far, of the 6 areas. By far. Some of the details we're going to be looking at as we move through, and we have meetings twice a month to deal with these systemic issues. We'll be in these areas for at minimum a year, where we reevaluate with our community partners and move forward from there. But one of the things we want to look at is vacant homes. Our recent homicide was in a vacant home. 25% of all the homes in this area are vacant. 25%. When you look at the demographics of who's married, single parents with children, we started looking at this because of what we were hearing from the citizens and community conversations and what Chief Height and his team was telling us about homicide suspects and victims, that most of them come from a single family home. We need to be zeroed in here and see what we can do to help these young people in most cases that are trying to raise a child. We want their child to be successful, and we want that young lady or that young man to be successful as well. When you look at education, we have known for years that if you have a high school diploma in the ever-changing world of America, in the world, that you are probably not going to get a middle-class income job with just a high school diploma. If that's the case, 70% of the people that live in this area do not have the basic skills to get a good job that gets them into a middle-class income. What we've seen recently, and some of our good friends have told us, that recent studies tell us that in 2014, you have to have a college degree. If that is the case, that means we have 86% of the people who live in this area, our friends and our citizens, that will be struggling. And I want you to remember the 8.4% bachelor's degree. That becomes important in a moment. Looking at the income disparity in this area compared to the rest of Indianapolis, we are still digging into this chart, but the one point I want to make is that nearly 13% of all the residents of this area, and remember, this is the safest area we have by far, 13% of the residents of this area make less than $10,000 a year. $10,000 a year. When you look at those that make $75,000 or more, it's 7.6%. How many of them had a bachelor's degree in this area? 8.4%. Education and income go hand in hand. We know from the information from the police department that a third of all of our homicides occurs because of fights and arguments. We also know, talking to our friends at the school district, and I really want to thank IPS for their support in giving us this information, that a third of their expulsions from school are from fights and arguments. The violence in the school mirrors the violence on the street. We started looking, and we know that 17 students were expelled from schools in this area during this time frame. These are the schools that they were expelled from: middle, elementary, and high school. That's 17 students over a year and a half that are expelled. The question is, where did they go? Are there services out there for them? And how many of them ended up in the judicial system, whether the juvenile court or adult court? We have to look at that at greater length. We know that 27% of all juveniles in the city that are arrested are charged with a felony. In this area of town, 32% of the juveniles are charged with a felony. How many of these juveniles are the ones that were expelled from school? We need to draw that data together, and we will. This is a code enforcement chart of the neighborhood. The green is for trash. A lot of that's associated with a vacant home, because remember, 25% of the homes here are vacant. We talked about, if you lived in the area, did you feel safe? If you lived in this area, would you feel like you had a high quality of life? And remember, this is the safest of our 6 areas. When you break the 6 areas down, 42,000, and let's be clear, we're a city of near a million. 42,000 of our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers live in 8 square miles of Indianapolis. That's 4.7% of the population. 4.7% of the population lives in an area where we know we have a high number of emergency calls, and knowing that 11% of all runs, calls for service from the Department of Public Safety, occur within 8 square miles of our city. 11% of the runs, calls for service occur where 42,000 of our residents live. These are calls for service, but when you start looking at violent crime, the numbers jump to alarming numbers. 42,000 of our neighbors and friends, 4.7% of our population, live in an area that accounts for 27% of our homicides. They live in an area that accounts for almost 30% of our non-fatal shootings. And this is important, and I want to make this point. 4.7% of the population accounts for 14.2% of all mental and emotional runs in the entire city of Indianapolis. If we put all of these areas together and we compared it to the rest of Indianapolis, if you were one of those 42,000 residents or you were visiting that area where the 42,000 live, these are the percentages higher that we explained earlier. So you have a 595% greater chance to be involved in a homicide if you live in one of these areas compared to the rest of the city. The first area was 152%. You can imagine the numbers from the other areas. I think those numbers speak for themselves. But as we notice that, let's also pay attention to the mental, emotional runs. It's an issue that we have to address, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So the mayor has been leading us to look at this as in three buckets: prevention, protection, and punishment. And I can assure you, we're working hard in all of these buckets. We are working diligently trying to make a difference with all of the members of the Department of Public Safety. We have a reentry conference that's coming up, October 30th, 2014. That is going to be a light of the world. We're going to shed some more light on reentry and work with our partners who are holding this conference. We'll continue to work on prevention. We'll continue to try to take funding providers and service providers and having them work together, especially in these 6 areas, because we know we can make more of an impact in these 6 areas than anywhere else in the city. We'll continue to sign support letters and work to raise money for organizations that are doing the good work in our community. We're going to continue to have community conversations. We've had many. We have changed the way we respond. We have changed the way we spend our money, all based on what we're hearing from our residents in our community. That's important. Everything we do here today, we may lead for a while, but we believe that it has to be community-driven to have long-term success. Has to be. I'm going to ask the chief to take a moment and kind of go over some of the things he's done on the protection side. I know there's a lot of questions. He's been showing and sharing data and his planning for the last 2 years. And Chief Hyde, if you take a few moments and share with the citizens what you're doing and what you have planned for the future.
Well, thank you, Director. I thank you for all the hard work that went into this by our admin staff and our operations staff. But this has been a long time coming, folks, bringing people together who have been looking at the same clientele for a number of years. So we don't have duplication of effort in the future. We're going to have an opportunity to show you what we've been seeing scientifically. We're not social workers, we're scientists of sorts. And as such, you're going to talk about how these people we've identified have impacted you for decades. Well, you have to have personnel, and for years, we've been looking at dwindling resources in terms of that. Some of our brain trust, some of our institutional knowledge left at the agency, but we staved it off. We've been able to have staffing meetings, staffing commissions. We had good hard work by our public safety director and deputy director and our chiefs and our officers and our command staff to make sure we have an efficient department. But how do we do that without resources? Well, we had to dig deep, tighten our belt a bit, and we found money to hire those officers. The other thing we did up front was when the director got here, we identified 45 people before he arrived. When we found another 116 or so to go back, remanded back to the street to actually perform the duties they were hired to do as police officers. It doesn't say district, it doesn't say assignment, it says police. That means we have to go back sometime to where we learned to be good police officers, the street. And in doing so, reallocating those officers, we also identified a workforce of about another 45 people, civilian staff, who were able to go back as well. And we're in the process of putting people back. We've hired civilian staff to replace police officers in many of those positions. As you see, the director talked about the growing classes in 2014, 15, 16, and 17. We're looking forward to that. Our workforce right now, 600 individuals can walk out of the department right now. The average age is 43. So we have about 55 people eagerly waiting to be new police officers in the training academy right now. I want to thank the mayor, the director, and city council for that. Use a full-time SWAT. Prior to this year, we didn't have a full-time SWAT team. Pretty much it was a call-up, dial-up team. Whenever we had a threat or a crisis in the community, we had to call them from the various assignments and from home to assemble at a location and begin to deal with the threat. Well, we're blessed to be able to put together a team, no additional cost to the city, by the way, who are available to do a multitude of things. Not only do they have the usual crisis or tactical situations, but they do high-risk warrants. They're in the community identifying those threat groups that we have identified who are armed and those persons who really are the menace of our community, many of which you've complained about for years. They work plain clothes, they do intel work, they're kind of like a one-stop shop, self-contained organization. The other part of it that I think is important is that we're going to continue to build out on the relationships we have with you already in terms of conversation with the community conversations. Director and I have gone on, being able to tactically decide based on information received from the community and this project, how we go forth and deploy our resources, taking our traffic units, for example, and putting them in those high-risk areas. In between event planning and all that we do with Homeland Security, we have our traffic units dedicated to certain areas. Not like other places where you see the old-fashioned stop and frisk. You heard that happen in New York and other places. No, we have targeted enforcement. We know who we're stopping and why in those targeted areas, and we also identified intel, things you tell us. Because when we stop you and ask you about, well, where's your seatbelt, a lot of times people give us information. We don't always have to write a ticket to garner that information, and we're finding community sharing a lot of information. As such, we canceled, eliminated, did away with all our hotlines. We asked people to forward information to our Crime Stoppers. It's been tremendous in terms of information we received. We act on that information within a timely fashion. A lot of warrants have come out of that situation. Our violent crime unit has benefited from that. Our drug units have benefited from that, and our covert ops. Those are our plainclothes units who go after bad guys with guns and drugs. So we're fortunate in the sense that up until this point, we've done this without a lot of resources. But now we need you, because you recognize and see us from a different point of view from this point on. You're going to have all the information you need to have. Transparency is the order of the day. We're going to share with you all our data. We're going to share with you our resources in terms of those persons who we know for a fact are in need of additional resources, particularly around mental health. We had 168 people last year take their lives. 125 were killed in homicides. So that tells you a lot that we have a problem with mental health, long-term substance abuse. We had a meeting this morning and a press conference around Narcan, and I want to thank Chief Roach. It was his idea and brain trust when we talked about heroin in one part of our city. Chief Roach came up with the idea of working with community to talk about Narcan, how police can give back proactively to people who are heroin addicts to save lives. So we're doing our part. We're really doing our part. 31 different incidences where we're involved in police shootings. 9 people killed and or injured. 2 officers actually lost their lives. We're giving everything we can to you folks. We squeeze the belt as tight as we can. We need your help right now. This can't be a one-time deal. We'll have a meeting and there's no aftercare component after this is done. After this is over, we hit the ground running as a team. We got a great police department, great leadership of the mayor and public safety directors, but we need you. We have a great team in the whole DPS staff, the fire department, EMS. We can go on, but we can't do it without you. And this is our opportunity to share with you what we believe is the right thing to do. This is a $15 million piece of software that we've been long needed to be able to share with you, call for service, and be able to cross-reference anything you want in terms of data. But even our partners in the sheriff department will tell you that they're right there with us, along with the state's attorney, that we cannot continue to do this with the resources that we have. We need the in-kind donation of the human spirit. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Chief, for that. Chief Coons and Homeland Security and the city, Mayor's office specifically, put in for Code for America. We are one of 7 cities that have been selected. What does that mean for us? It means that in February, we will have 3 of the best minds when it comes to coding for computers and software and for data that will be here. And why were we one of 7 cities selected? Because of this new approach to data-driven government. That is a big win for us as a city. And as the chief alluded to, a $15 to $18 million investment in a new record management system and making sure this is sustainable in the future, and computer-aided dispatch, which will be up and running mid-year. The next thing was about punishment. We talked about mandatory minimum sentencing. We looked at our 70 homicides between January the 1st and June the 15th. The mayor has been to the State House along with the chief and I and looked at mandatory minimum sentencing for individuals that use a weapon in a violent crime. If we had mandatory minimum sentencing of just 10 years, 23 of our homicides would not have occurred. If we had a mandatory minimum sentence of just 5 years for violent gun crimes, 18 homicides would not have occurred. We will continue to push that at the State House. The third bucket is a different approach. It is an approach that we have a lot of people that get arrested that have mental illness. We have a lot of people that get arrested that have drug and alcohol dependency, and putting them in jail is not necessarily the right answer. We are looking at trying to find a way to take them somewhere other than jail for assistance. Mr. Curry in the prosecutor's office has been very forthright with us on this and helping. We can't do this without the good work of the prosecutor's office. David Brimstead is here today from prosecutor's office. David, would you like to add a few words about this?
Thank you, Director. Terry Curry couldn't be here today, but I want to tell you that he's all in cooperating with the mayor's office and the police department to try and get to the root sources of crime. We're always associated with the punishment part of the formula that the mayor's put forth, but we're always looking for ways to divert people away from the system and to defer prosecutions, because most of us in law enforcement realize that we can't just prosecute our way out of the problem. We need to deal with the root causes. So the engagement center concept is a concept that allows police officers to direct people who need services to those services either immediately before a prosecution commences, to avoid the prosecution, or after a prosecution commences, so that we can avoid having to put someone through the criminal justice system. It's expensive and it's inefficient. So we're looking for ways to deal with the addicted, people with mental health issues and those kind of things, to get them into a resource center and to deal with that. Now, we don't know what that's going to look like. We've gone to Columbus, Ohio, and looked at a very successful resource center over there. And like I said, Prosecutor Terry Curry is very honored and all in to spearhead this look into what an engagement center is going to look like.
David, thank you for that. David has been helping us since our very first efficiency team. So David, thank you for that. Please thank Mr. Curry. As we look at the next part, so where do we go with all this? There's a lot of data, a lot of things that's alarming to us. That we're certainly alarmed for 42,000 residents that live in these areas. What are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to work with the community. I'm going to kind of do this slide in reverse. We're going to set goals and objectives, but we're going to work with the community to set those goals and objectives for 2015. That work begins immediately. Our staffs have already said what they think success looks like, but we cannot really be successful without community input. We're going to be reaching out to them. We're going to continue to hold community conversations. But we're going to have community engagement teams to deal with 3 issues that we know we have to deal with immediately we want to get started. One is on mental illness. And Colonel Deslin is here from the Sheriff's Office to talk a little bit more about some of the issues we're facing with mental illness and how the Sheriff's Office is going to lead this team for us.
Thank you, Director. Sheriff Layton was not able to be here today, but he asked me to express his real interest in helping out. He applauds Director Riggs and Mayor Ballard for this effort. He's especially excited about the fact that we might be able to participate in that and the aspect of this that has to do with helping the mentally ill here in our community. Most people don't know, but we have in our jails at any given time, on any day, 2,300 inmates, and 30% of those inmates are classified as mentally ill. We administer more than 700 prescriptions every day just for those inmates that are mentally ill. We spend about $7.7 million a year taking care of those people that are classified as mentally ill in the jail. Now, when they're in the jail, they're safe, they're secure, they're fed, and we also make sure that they get the proper medications that they have. But The jail is a jail, it's not a hospital, and even though the sheriff has become the de facto mental health caretaker for the county, because there are more people in our facility than any other who are classified that way, we really don't do what we should for them. That money that we spend does keep them safe and secure, but we don't have the ability to do the proper counseling that they need, and we want to get them out of the jail and somewhere where they can get help. A lot of the crimes that are committed by those individuals that are in our jails are committed because they're simply off their medications and they're not getting treatment. And if they were just properly treated and cared for, a lot of the crimes that they've committed would not happen. So we're very excited about being able to get those individuals redirected into facilities that can give them the help that they deserve. And again, Sheriff Layton is excited about this. He thanks both the mayor and the director for asking the Marion County Sheriff's Office to be involved.
Colonel, thank you. That's a question. One of those tough questions we have to ask ourselves as a community. Does a civilized city place those with mental illness in a jail facility? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, and that's the tough decision and conversation that team would have. Manny Mendez is here from Code Enforcement to tell you a little bit about vacant housing. We have in any one of these areas, 24 to 35% of the homes vacant. Manny has just taken over Code Enforcement. Manny, could you share a few words?
What the Department of Code Enforcement will look at doing, taking over the unsafe building, is getting out into these hot spots and start looking at ways to control those homes so that we don't have the element that neighbors don't want next door. So we'll be moving forward on those and working with our partners at DPS to make these homes more controlled.
So don't be surprised if you don't see in the near future a police officer, code enforcement officer, animal care control officer going into the same area working on issues to deal with all of them. Holiday activities, one of the things that we talked about in the community conversation with young people, and this is pretty much wrapping up today, but I think this is a good place to really start drawing this to a close. Talking to the young people, hundreds of young people in our city at community conversations, one of the things that we continue to hear from them is this, and this is sad to me. They don't feel loved, feel like no one cares for them. They really don't have any mentors. They don't have a safe place to go. And when they're not in school, they're hungry. They're hungry. And this is when we talk to hundreds of kids from these areas. And one of the things that they said is they used to love when churches would open their doors and have a fifth quarter, meaning you go to a ball game for 4 quarters, you go to a church for fifth quarter. And you start thinking, why are they wanting to go there? Why? Because they feel loved, they feel wanted, and they have a safe environment and they're eating. All those things that they're asking for. I don't think it's too much to ask for. So I know the hearts of ministers in the community, and I've talked to many. And I thought this is a quick fix. And as I talked to them, I found out that when they do that with social media now, they could have over 1,000 kids show up, and they end up having security issues. So I've been talking to Reverend Harrison and saying, what can we do to deal with this in the future? And Reverend, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Director. We have a lot of churches across the city that really want to do their part in helping and creating those fifth quarters, those safe havens for kids across the city. So what we're going to be doing now is working with church communities, particularly during the holidays, to create safe havens for kids. We're going to create nights where we have more than one safe haven during the night at the same time. So if we do one on a Friday night, we will have a couple of safe havens, one on the east side, west side, where kids can go. And we will also work closely with public safety, because one of the big concerns is security. So that if churches open up their doors, we can provide the security on the inside, but also work with the law enforcement community so that we provide the security on the outside, so that when parents drop their kids off, they know that their children are safe. So we are looking forward to work with public safety during this holiday season to create all these safe havens across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. With that said, let me just kind of regroup for one thing. Remember, we're doing this because we want to enhance the quality of life of the citizens in these areas. The 42,000 are family and friends that live there. We need to do more for them as a public safety. We're asking the community for help. The other thing is what we're talking about here, if you're looking for some flashing title or flashing name, that's not it. This is a philosophical shift in the way we do business as government. This began with Mayor Ballard. It continues now. This is where data can take us and help us. We will deal with these 6 areas. We'll begin dealing with them now and trying to help those residents. We will meet twice a month and we will roll up our sleeves, and maybe some days we'll just talk about mental illness and what we need to do in our response. But next year, some point in next year, we're going to meet once a week in this area, open to the public, to discuss issues facing our community as a whole. So this type of data will be expanded to the entire city. Maybe not with the intensity here because where the need is. But data is here to stay, and it's going to help us make decisions as a community on how to better improve lives. So at this time, if we have some questions from the media, the mayor and I and chief and our providers will be certainly willing to take those. Mr. Mayor?
Anything at all?
Yeah, other than the meetings, I'm still a little fuzzy on how this, are you gonna be moving officers in different directions? Is it beefing up, patrols in these areas? There was some mention of maybe moving traffic, police into these areas. It's a little unclear to me what your staffing, not how your staffing will change based on this.
The way we'll do staffing is, yes, there will be additional officers that will go through these areas. Chief Hyde has said he will do that. Manny Mendez here from Code Enforcement, he's going to make these areas priority areas. If we have a community partner working, they're going to be moved to the first of the list. Why is that? It's because we have areas of concern that have most of the issues that we're facing as a community. So we're going to work with communities, see what those issues are, and we're going to make sure that we place the services that we need in those areas immediately. The mayor has dictated to us as a command staff or as his executive staff that if someone from one of these areas calls and needs help, we're going to be in there immediately. Why is that? Because 4.7% of the population is living in an area that has 27% of the homicides and 29% of the non-fatal shootings and has systemic issues going back for generations. So the resources will be there and they'll be there immediately. And they're, quite frankly, a lot of them have already been moved there and they're working there right now.
If I could add to that, I hope you don't miss the fact that a key phrase that he said was, this is a philosophical shift. You know, this is not more cops on the street. This is bringing in mental health experts. It's bringing in food. It's bringing in churches. This is a different way of looking at it. I would suggest that most of the people in this audience today were shocked at those mental health statistics. Because when I hear about mental health and people talk to me, it comes from generally one population. And we have to understand this is a different way of looking at it. As the director said, we have 6 areas in this city that looks like, to me, their quality of life is pretty bad. And I think as a community we have to look at that and see if we can use them as a model, that we can put the resources necessary, the mental health resources, the food resources, the housing resources, the counseling resources, the school resources, all of that together to improve the quality of life in these areas.
And kind of foreshadowing some of the other things we have for these areas is because we know that the answer is not just in government. That's why we have all these partners and asking them to be involved in these areas, and we're very excited about some of the work that's already being done and the people that have said they'll expand in these areas. But we're looking with our 3,200 men and women that serve in the Department of Public Safety, that they have service quarterly, that if they want to get involved and help out these communities with some of these issues, that they will help out in these 6 areas. We will make them a priority.
Troy, logistically, how are you going to get the word out beyond the media to some of these residents in these communities?
The mayor has given us his neighborhood liaisons that will be out there working and sharing information. Pretty soon, we're going to ask Chief Hyde to lead this with all of the direct reports in the Department of Public Safety to go in these areas, to sit and talk to the community, tell them what we're doing, earn the respect back, whether it's perceived or actual, to try to earn their respect back. Chief Malone's really been looking on the fire department side, making the fire departments a central hub of activity for people in the community. So it's just, you know what it is? I know we're getting a lot of questions, what's that one thing you can do? It's not one thing. It involves government services, social services, community members, heavily, us working together. These issues did not occur overnight. They're not going to be solved overnight. It's going to take hard work. And the mayor has given us the resources necessary to do that, but we also need our community partners, and we need to do innovative things like Chief Malone's talking about.
Will those residents in those 6 areas, will they see a quicker response to some of their concerns and issues in those communities? Say,
Yes.
for instance, nuisance abatement, abandoned homes, drugs in the community, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, this is the data, but understand this is also a work in progress. And I tell my team all the time, do it right, not fast. So I would suggest that these areas are gonna get a lot of help pretty fast. I don't think there's much question about that. But we have to look at this in the long-term issue. And how are we gonna make sure that we do this so that we have to do it in other areas of the city that we get it right. All that said, it's all resource driven, right? But the fact that you see the people in here, there's gonna be a lot of people in those neighborhoods pretty quickly, helping them out. Am I right, Reverend Harrison? You know.
Can either of you give us an idea of what this looks like for the officer on the street? Talking a lot about mental health issues, there are privacy issues when it comes to people's health and that sort of thing. What does that look like for an officer who comes into a situation and somebody has someone with mental health issues?
We'll let Chief Hyde respond to that.
Great question, but I think we already hit the curve in a sense with crisis and intervention training, as you know, already has been institutionalized in the department and sheriff's office as well. So we also are already equipped and they're partnering with mental health types to help them process each one of those cases we may encounter.
I know that a couple of media people are running up on some time to get on the air later. We'll stop now. We'll be available for questions, but once again, I want to make this clear. This is difficult work. This is hard work. This is long-term commitment work. And we need to roll up our sleeves as a community and work together. And as a Department of Public Safety, I know it's unusual for us to say this, but we don't have all the answers to everything. The community does. We're going to put the resources there, but we're also hoping that the community will not only put the monetary resources there to help some of these systemic issues, but as I said last December year in remarks, is roll up your sleeves and help those individuals in those communities that are doing that work. Once again, thank you to our donors and our private partners that are here to do the work, what we call God's work each and every day. Thank you all so much for that. Thank you for being here today. We'll certainly be around here to answer questions. Thank you so much. Thank you.